All righty then. We are ready to, and I must admit, with a slight change in the programming today, we do not have any thoughts on the NXT program from this past week because apparently my DVR did not recognize it or it wasn't on there. So I didn't see NXT. And we're not going to make that mistake again. I've already checked it next week for the big debut on the September the 14th of the new NXT with the blotchy finger painted logo and whatever they're going to do to this show. As in the words of Lucille Ricardo, I don't know what they do to it. Vitamin Benjamin. But I did say, Brian, and I said this to you out loud, and then immediately it left your mind and you didn't think about it again, that I was going to watch the Charlotte and Nia Jax rematch on Raw this past week. And that immediately left your mind and you forgot about it. And as a result, you did not see that match. Is that correct?
Yes and no. I did not see that match. I did not completely forget about Raw because I was actually feeling kind of up on wrestling. I enjoyed the AEW pay-per-view. And I was also really curious. How are they going to react to this AEW pay-per-view? Everyone was already raving about it. All the sites were already reporting about CM Punk and Bryan Danielson. Everyone was talking about it. How's WWE going to respond? And I got a few minutes into that Randy Orton, Matt Riddle promo, and I gave up. I checked out, and I forgot that I was going to check back in to hopefully see the Charlotte match, and I completely never came back.
Okay, well, I recorded the show, and I said, well, I'll just start at the top and zip through and see if anything catches my eye. and that was where I started immediately fast-forwarding. They tried to do, and I don't know if he's still listening, but Rob Moore from out in Greenville, Texas, sent me an idea.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah, he got me sued is what he did.
I was there.
Yeah, you were there. He sent me for one of the fan weeks. He had sent me an idea. He said, what about if you have this match where, and it can be done as a single or tag teams, but two entities, either two individuals or two teams start. And once a pinfall or a win is scored, then that person immediately faces someone else and on until you get everybody in, boom. And so we booked it in Morristown, Tennessee, and I called it the King of the Mountain match in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I'll be goddamn if within 2 weeks to a month, I got a letter from some idiot tough man contest promoter saying, well, we have King of the Mountain fights. We have King of the Mountain copyrighted. You must not, like this was a spot show match to begin with, right? But besides that, just that he thought that there was going to be some marketplace confusion between the amateur tough man contest that he presented in various bars and barns around Chattanooga, Tennessee, I believe, and one spot show that we did on a monthly basis in Morristown where we did that match one time. And so I wrote him a letter back, said, don't worry, we're not going to do the King of the Mountain match anymore, or King of the Valley, or King of the Hill, or King of anything else. But I don't think that anybody was going to mistake your drunken amateur tough man fighters for my goddamn trained professional wrestlers that are featured on television every week in a variety of markets around the area. So fuck off. But anyway, they did the same match, but they called it Tag Team Turmoil. So maybe they'll get a letter here soon. And all the multiple teams at the start of the program gave canned, emotionless statements. That's going to be a constant throughout this program. And then here came Matt Riddle and Randy Orton. Instead of RK Bro, they ought to be RO Broke. If this is a forced pairing, if I have ever seen one. Randy Orton was there doing an in-ring interview, and Randy Orton was all right. And as soon as Riddle spoke, it got ridiculous. It looked like a fucking Hell's Angels Club chairman and his fucking special needs nephew.
Once I heard the scripted line about munchies, I was just like, this is the worst shit I've ever seen. This is so much worse than anything AEW does. I'm not watching this. And that's what I gave up right away. The munchies line. Specifically the munchies line.
same thing. So I fast forwarded. All the tag teams had some matches, and Arcade Bro watched them. Then they had Drew McIntyre against Seamus. We've never seen that before. I stopped at the Damian Priest promo. They're giving him scripted shit too. He does it well, but God, I'd love to see him actually do a wrestling promo if they left him alone and he had an angle to talk about. And then Rhea Ripley and Nikki Ass are now a tag team. And they scripted them bad, and there was no emotion, and the material was bad. And then they had a match with Natalya and Tamina. And I just wrote, if Paul Heyman had had Rhea Ripley in ECW, I think she'd have been the biggest star in the company. She'd have been the female Sandman.
Well, yeah, she would have been beating all the men if Paul had her there.
Yes, and he would have pushed her to the fucking moon, and she'd have been on magazines. John Morrison, who I used to have such affection for, hosted his Moist TV interview segment where he threatens to apparently shoot people with his water gun with Karrion Kross.
I was going to say, did you say Moist?
Moist TV. Because he's Johnny Drip Drip, and he has the water cannon that he shoots people with, and it's Moist TV. And Karrion Kross is sitting there, and he's alternating between acting like he's on an old Merv Griffin show and then being his evil person. And it was horrible material. Now they're burying Kross. This was insane and juvenile. Kross came off like a moron. Morris came off like he's got Morris the Cat. Morris the Cat was a better actor than John Morrison here. John Morrison appeared to have the IQ of 6. It would just, and then they go out to have a match. This was a pre-tape, and then they go out to have a match. And we're expected to believe anything about, or even care about this match, even if we don't believe anything about it, after this bad sketch they just did. And Kross comes out in the Demolition Light outfit. It's so sad. As he was coming to the ring, you got the flavor when you were listening to the announcers and you're seeing the set and the way it's shot and the lighting and the costumes. It's like watching one of those goofy game shows where somebody's about to run an obstacle course. Some person they've pulled off the street and they're going to get dumped in a fucking mud hole. This is Raw. They did a package on Nia Jax, which looked great because she was just giving people a bunch of fucking bumps. And then she did a promo in the back, which scripted material. She was trying to be dramatic in delivering it. It was stagey delivery. She's not allowed to look at the camera, so she had to kind of stare off blankly. They had a fucking breakdown in cooperation last week on this television program, and they couldn't even just let this big Samoan giant woman go out and act mad about it.
Did they play clips of it throughout the show and talk about it?
No, they played a clip of her kicking Charlotte off head first into the turnbuckle and then hitting her with the fucking finish. They didn't play any of the actual uncooperativeness, the potatoes on purpose, and the general, train wreck that it was. But they didn't let... Apparently I missed Charlotte's promo when I was fast forwarding through the other shit. I'd like to have seen that, but by the time I realized it, I wasn't going to go back. But Nia Jax's promo was just more canned scripted shit that she was trying to be an actress with. Instead of screaming, "You blonde I'm going to fucking rip your goddamn hair out by the roots," which would be what you would normally think after they've been slapping each other in the face last week. But I don't know. What do I know? Anyway, then they had the match, Brian. You missed it. You know what I thought about this match? I thought this is the best match I've ever seen Nia Jax have.
Get out of here.
Because and by the way, it was worse than I thought last week, because to get the match, the rotten stinker of a match that Nia had with Charlotte, she had already beaten Nikki Ass and Rhea Ripley earlier in the program. Left them laying. But in this one, Charlotte has a great entrance, looks like a star. Nia Jax has an entrance that looks like somebody put a cape on a refrigerator. And so I'm expecting, and Shayna Baszler is with Nia Jax now. What?
It's a visual I've never thought of before.
Shayna Baszler Baszler comes out with Nia Jax, and so the two of them, Shayna looks like she's dressed like she just got paroled from reform school. She's a juvenile delinquent, and here's this giant cape-covered Samoan. But the bell rang, and suddenly okay, the point is, the reason why last week's match got all this attention was because communication, as we said, broke down. They started pie-facing, slapping each other. They're pulling each other's hair. And finally, they got back on the same page, but it was just a horrible match. So as soon as the bell rings, Shayna Baszler gets the microphone and asks Nia Jax, who she just came out with, are you going to win tonight or are you going to choke? What? And Nia's shocked, like, why are you talking to me this way? And Charlotte jumps Nia from behind. And I felt like the spot on Always Sunny where somebody says, what is happening? So now the corner girl is antagonistic toward the girl she's cornering. Then why'd she come out? But anyway, they started having an ugly fight. And they were being stiff and they were snatching each other's hair, but they were playing off last week when they were really doing it. But they were doing it as a work. And imagine that, it looked better. So then they're trash talking. And then Charlotte said, well, fuck you. And she rolls out and crotch chops Nia and grabs her belts and going to take a walk like they used to do in the old days. But Shayna Baszler distracts her and Nia grabs her and pulls her in the ring and gets back on her. And they do some shit in the ring and Charlotte hits chop block and they do a back and forth struggle. Again, it wasn't a pretty match. You can't have one. You're not going to be doing one tackle, drop down, hip toss, drop kick with Nia Jax. So they were playing off what they did last week, and it worked because they were working, so it was better. and Charlotte, at one point, Nia Jax was going to give her a superplex, and Charlotte drops down and gives her a power bomb, which Nia tried to sell. They went through a break. The one nitpick I have with Charlotte is she did her moonsault off the top buckle to the floor and flattened Nia Jax, but the problem was Nia had taken a bump on the floor, and Charlotte just walks right up the ropes, climbs right up the buckles, does the big backflip. In the previous 10 seconds, had never looked behind her to see where Nia Jax was. So just that one little thing, look behind you. Even if you're not really looking for her, you know she's going to catch you, but you're not supposed to know that. But anyway, Nia took over again. And finally, Shayna Baszler distracts Nia this time again. And Charlotte hits her natural selection off the top rope. And it, boom, 1, 2, 3. And the match, it wasn't, Mildred Burke and June Byers, but it was lots better than last week and probably the best I've seen Nia Jax, except for the interplay between Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax was confusing and stagey and distracting, but at least Charlotte won and didn't get crippled. But then,
wait, can I stop you?
Yes.
So Charlotte won. What was the point of Charlotte, the champion, losing last week to Nia Jax? Or Nia Jax. Now you got me doing it.
So they could have a rematch and she could win this week, I guess.
Is everything a rematch there? Yeah, I guess it is.
Only when it shouldn't be called for. Anyway, then...
Yeah, really?
Alexa Bliss shows up on the screen. And they start promoing back and forth. Alexa and her little doll and her spookiness. And again, Alexa Bliss is great at this. She should be an actress in horror movies. She should not be in the wrestling ring. And the lights go off, and the lights come back on, and she's in the ring with Charlotte. A foot shorter, 50 pounds lighter. This looks ridiculous. And Charlotte says, what do you want, Alexa? And she points at the belt. She wants the belt. And so Charlotte basically, okay, well, if you want a title match, you've got it. But this is my ring. And then she got out of her ring. So she gave her a title match, said it was her ring, and then she got out of it and left. So there'll be a title match sometime in the future. And there was more Raw after that, but after that, I didn't want to see anymore. And that's why everybody's turning cartwheels over AEW. Because I guess the shit sandwich is better than the giant douche.
Did you see AEW did beat Raw? Dynamite beat Raw in the key demo this past week.
Now you sound like Uncle Dave in the key demo.
Well, because what else am I supposed to call it? The 18, the blah, blah, blah demo? What's the key demo? Everyone knows what the fuck I'm talking about.
How about you say they got closer, and this is tightening up. I don't give a fuck about the demos. I look at how many people's watching this thing, and I got a sneaking suspicion that by the time that they get finished, and possibly with Bray Wyatt and or Ric Flair, along with Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole and Zabba, I think they can beat Raw at this point. I got confidence in them. Because this fucking show, anything produced by the WWE is rapidly self-destructing, like the opening instructions on Mission Impossible. How's that for you 60s TV fans? And everybody's showing up on the other channel, where they're hailed as conquering heroes who have escaped from Devil's Island. So I don't care about the demo. I think they're going to tighten it up even further.
You don't care about the demo, but the question I have is long-term. USA Network cares, and so much of everything right now is built around these television fees. If WWE keeps dropping and AEW keeps rising, I'm not saying WWE is going to go out of business, but so much of their business is based around those television fees. Television itself is already having problems and losing people, but, they're streaming and everything else. But WWE, if they keep slipping, and there's nothing that shows you they're not going to slip. I saw 3 minutes and it was enough for me. I saw a montage of tag team interviews. Over 2 minutes, I saw, 8 different tag teams. And then I saw a few minutes of Matt Riddle acting like a child, and Randy Orton. And I had such a weird feeling seeing Randy Orton there, and I'm not, could be seen as nothing but an insult, but it's not my intention. Watching Randy Orton there with Riddle and just seeing this whole fucking spectacle, it was like seeing Moose Cholak in the 80s. Just like, ooh, what are you doing there? What are you doing? He's so out of place amongst this, and I don't think there's anything that shows anybody any signs that WWE is going to get any better anytime soon. I think it's only going to get worse until Vince's stranglehold on everything is not there anymore.
Well, anyway, it was certainly a very raw edition of Raw.
You feel like you got it raw after you watch that fucking show.
It definitely needed some lubrication. What are you putting on your programs this week to grease them up so they slide in better?
We're going to oil all of you up this week on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. Get information about all the shows on Twitter at Superpodcast or on Facebook. A few notes. The latest wrestling history mystery from Charting the Territories and wrestling historian Al Getz is out now. I don't want to say too much, but Jim, you and I have talked about this in the past. This is the first of a multi-part series in the Wrestling History Mysteries miniseries, looking at Mr. Zabo. Al Getz found a wrestler who in 1963 briefly wrestled in Oklahoma, had a world title shot, and then vanished with no record of who he is, and other historians, prominent historians, getting it wrong about who he is. A fascinating mystery. If you love wrestling history, check this out. ChartingThePodcast.com, also available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Also want to make mention of the latest episode of Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam. John's guest this week, Jace Nacarado, also known as Jace Sharknado and many other butchered names. But a fun show, a mailbag show, lots of listener questions about things like, what if Ted DiBiase stayed with the UWF after the Crockett purchase? What if Crockett doesn't lose Roddy Piper to the WWF? What if Ric Flair went with Tully and Arn to the WWF in 1988? Those questions and so much more, can't really say they're answered, but they're thought about, and people have opinions, and hear them today.
They're mulling them over as we speak.
McAdamPod.com, also available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Just search for Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam. And of course, the 605 Superpodcast, the Mothership! That's a good sound because the new episode of the 605 Superpodcast will be springing upon you next week. It is all done. We're putting the final touches on the editing in the co-host chair. And I have to say, I think people are going to love this conversation. Brian Solomon in the co-host chair, of course, he is the author of the upcoming, the first ever biography of the Sheik that everyone's going to be talking about. He also has a background working for Pro Wrestling Illustrated and WWE Magazine. We talk about a number of things, including what was it like working for Shane McMahon when he ran WWE Magazine. All of that and so much more, a packed show, including not a lights out segment. I'm going to call it a lights on segment. What's been happening at Arcadian Vanguard with the recent shows that we cut from the schedule. Find out the truth. Also, we have Howard Baum on Burt Prentice. We have Tim Hornbaker on Buddy Rogers and so much more. Out next week. More information next week. The 605 Super Podcast. Go through the archive today at 605pod.com. Available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Jim, it's about to touch down. The Mothership!
I'll tell you one thing.
Yes.
You got did Brian Solomon when he was talking about what it was like to work with Shane McMahon, did he talk about him dribbling a basketball nonstop in his office?
No, but there is a rather interesting story about Shane's reaction to a picture of his grandfather being hung up in the office.
Well, my God, why would you want to see a picture of your grandfather being hung up in your office?
No. His grandfather who started the company.
That.
His grandfather who started the wrestling.
Well, that's no reason to hang him over it and to show a picture of it to his grandson. What if somebody took you out and hung you? Would you want your grandchildren to see a picture of it, much less put one up in their office?
I don't think I'd want photographers there for that occasion.
No, not at all. But Shane had the office in the corner on the 4th floor, on the opposite corner from Vince's over in the talent relations corner. And when you went down the hallway, you could hear 30 feet away. He's always dribbling a basketball next to his desk.
What do you think Shane's dream job actually was?
I honestly think he would have liked to, in years gone by, now that he's grown up and he's got his own family and he's been successful, he's made his own money, it might be, obviously it is different. But at that point in time, he looked up to Vince. He wanted to be Vince. I think he wanted to run the company in the future. And he loved the business. He just didn't really get a chance to grow up in it and get an education in wrestling. He was compromised or handicapped in that respect by actually being the boss's son. Nobody's going to try to smarten him up to the way the business really works. They would just say things they wanted Vince's son to hear.
And that's what he knew about wrestling. Imagine what he knew about publishing.
Oh, my God. Anyway,